for the benefit of the marhumeen, of the sponsors of tonight's program, and for all of your marhumeen and marhumat, and for all the marhumeen and marhumat and the shuhada of Islam, please gift them with the recitation of the Surah Al-Fatiha after salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وخاتم النبيين وسيد المرسلين أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعن الله الدائم على أعدائهم أجمعين من ليلتنا هذه إلى قيام يوم الدين. Respected brothers and sisters, Alhamdulillah, Allah has given us this tawfiq to come together as mu'mineen, as believers, lovers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. And despite difficulties in maybe making the time in our schedule and other potential things we could be doing, we decided that on this night we would come together in the Islamic Center and unite because of our love for Ahlul Bayt and especially our love for Rasulullah and Imam Hassan al-Mujtaba and Imam Rida alayhi salam. Please recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Your presence here tonight is very valuable, and we shouldn't consider these things to be just ordinary or normal. Alhamdulillah that this city is blessed with a place where people can come together and worship and remember and commemorate and build a stronger community, and inshallah this is a stepping stone to something which inshallah which is even better and greater and more effective and more active. Tonight I wanted to focus a little bit more on some of the practical lessons that we can take from Imam al-Rida alayhi salam, and the reason is because last night we had the opportunity to look at some of the teachings from our Prophet. In particular, we talked about this topic of how do we have good akhlaq when the situation is tough and difficult. And we saw how not just our Prophet but the previous prophets as well, they would always have logic, they would always be calm in the face of people insulting them. They would never retaliate by using low tactics. They would never be violent towards the others, their enemies, even though their enemies were threatening violence against them. But they would have logic and they would have adabul hudur, meaning that they would always have the etiquette of one who knows they're in the presence of Allah. And they were able to achieve such high status of akhlaq because of their akhlaq and their ethics being rooted on this knowledge of the presence of Allah. Tonight I want to talk about some of the practical teachings from Imam Rida alayhi salam's life. Like I mentioned yesterday, when I give speeches I like to try to see what can I offer that's practical, things that we can take and we can apply immediately in our lives. Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam are great beyond description, but that doesn't mean that they are so great that we can't take anything from them and apply it in our lives. I know that when I went to the Hawza, alhamdulillah, I was blessed to be able to go to the Hawza. One of the things that immediately I was blessed with is when I heard teachers speaking about the practical teachings of Islam, meaning that how do we be Muslim in our homes? How do we be Muslim when it comes to our families? How do we be Muslim when it comes to time management? Imagine one of the first things that they taught us in the Hawza is about time management. And time management is, a very practical topic. You learn about it if you're going into, like, let's say, we have people here who are in different fields, and within your fields, I'm sure you know about the importance of time management. One of the brothers yesterday is a manager. He was talking about how he emphasizes that his employees should be there on time, right? But Islam has something to say about time management. So when we come to these gatherings, yes, we want to be inspired. Yes, we want to appreciate the high status of Ahlul Bayt, alayhim as-salam, but we also want to see what we can do for ourselves. So one of the things we know about Imam Rida alayhi salam is that he was known as Al-Imam Ar-Ra'uf. There is one time when somebody is Rahim, and there's another time when they are Ra'uf. Rahim, normally in English we translate it as somebody who is kind and merciful. But Ra'uf is a word which is really hard to translate in English. Maybe you could use the word compassionate, but in a way compassionate is the same thing as kind. Right? So what does it mean to be Ra'uf? Those people who study the words and the differences, they say that somebody who has Ra'afa has a type of care which has a high degree of ikhlas, meaning that they have pure and sincere care for the other person. In all circumstances, if that person is being pained, they are pained. If that person is being sad, they are saddened. And so Imam Rida alayhi salam, one of his characteristics is that he really cared for other people in a way which was very pure and very sincere. One of the hadiths that we have about Imam Rida alayhi salam is about those who perform his ziyarah, those who go to visit him. Inshallah, if you haven't gotten a chance to go, then inshallah may Allah give you that tawfiq to be able to go soon. And if you have gone, may Allah Ta'ala give you the opportunity to go again very soon. The hadith is famous hadith. Man zarani ala bu'adi dari wa shutuni mazari ataytuhu yawm al-qiyamati fi thalathi mawatin. Whoever visits me, even though I live far away, even though I am buried very distant from the homelands, but if you come and visit me, Imam Rida alayhi salam promises that he's going to come to our assistance at 3 times, because he's Ra'uf. He's the Imam who cares. He's the Imam who's compassionate. What are those 3? He says, حَتَّى أُخَلِّصَهُ مِنْ أَهْوَالِهَا, meaning that I'm there to save you from the frights of the hereafter. What are they? إِذَا تَطَايَرُتِ الْكُتُبِ يَمِينًا وَشِمَالًا وَعِنْدَ الصِّرَاطِ وَعِنْدَ الْمِيزَانِ. 3 times. When the books are distributed, we know that some will receive their book in their right hand, but others, they will not be given that type of respect, because what they have created in terms of their book of deeds, it's not something that deserves to be treated with respect. So they'll be given it in their left hand or behind their backs, and then there will be the time of the crossing of the sirat, of the path, and then the mizan, when our deeds will be measured against the deeds of, according to some hadith, the deeds of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim as-salam. So the Imam is Ra'uf, but not just in the hereafter, in this world as well. I'm going to give you a couple of examples of very practical teachings from Imam Rida alayhi salam. One of the things that I found really interesting about the Imam is how was he when he was at home? How was he with his family? So this hadith was very interesting for me. The hadith says that when Imam Rida alayhi salam would be free from his obligations outside of the home, right? Everyone, once you become an adult, you have some things to take care of outside of the home typically, right? And Islam is a practical religion. Like, you have to go, especially if you're the breadwinner for your home, you got to go and get your rizq, you got to get your provisions. But when he would be done with that, what would he do? Would he go home and just go in front of his screen and just like, just start surfing the web, right? Would he go home and just like, let's say, go into his room and the only thing he would do is worship Allah? What would Imam Rida alayhi salam do? This hadith says that when he would be free from his obligations outside of the home, he would gather everyone at home, the young people and the old people, and he would talk to them. They would have conversations, and he would take comfort in them. The word comfort meaning uns, the word that's used in Arabic is uns. He would take comfort from them and he would give them comfort as well. You know how practical and important and relevant this is in our lives right now? Alhamdulillah, as I mentioned last night, I have a chance to work with young people in a full-time school on a daily basis pretty much. And I've been in this position in different schools for about 10 or 11 years now, where I've been spending time with young people, seeing how they develop, how they grow, the challenges that they face in full-time Islamic schools. One of the things that's really striking for me, my dear brothers and sisters, is children who come from a home where they feel safe and secure and loved versus children who come from a home where they feel like they're on their own. Now, what do I mean by a child who feels that they're on their own? You can be on your own when you don't have anybody around you, or you can be on your own when most of the time you spend is in front of a screen. Okay? Now, there are some homes where, if we can ask this question, that what is the central point of the home? Where is the center of attraction for the home? There's some homes that they design these days, and if you have one of these homes, I'm not criticizing you, I'm just making an observation, so please don't take it personally. I haven't been to your homes, okay? But there's some homes that they design today where the center point of attraction is the recreation or entertainment room. And in particular, that wall in which you want to mount your TV. That's the central point of attraction. And so where they want you, they engineer the home so that you spend the maximum amount of time in front of a screen. But if you look at the seerah of our imams, and then even if you look at the seerah, meaning the way that our great scholars used to live their lives, it wasn't, the central point of attraction wasn't in the home, wasn't a screen, but rather it was the opportunity to be able to interact with each other in a beautiful manner, to sit with each other, to discuss, to talk. That's why it's so important to have at least one meal together as a family. One meal a day, if we can have one meal together where we're sitting, where there's no TV on, there's no devices that are a distraction, and we're just talking, we see the benefit that those children have when they come to school the next day. Because they feel like they're part of a team that supports them, that loves them, that provides them with that nurturing. And it's actually incredible. They've done psychological studies. Not that we believe in these like independently of Islam, but sometimes we can get something there that does ta'yid, meaning that it supports Islamic findings. So there are studies about how children who have meals with their family, how they tend to be less depressed and they're more happy as well too. Anyway, that's one point. Second hadith, which is very relevant and interesting and useful for us. Basically my lecture consists of only 3 hadiths, right? I know it's Sunday night, but tomorrow's a holiday, right? So you guys can't tell me that you have to rush off to work or something like that, okay? But still, I'm only going to do 3 hadiths, but inshallah all 3 of them are relevant for us and they can help us. So I already did one of the 3, or 1/3 done, and mashallah, you're very patient and you're very participating well, and alhamdulillah, giving me good feedback. I appreciate that. Please recite salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The second hadith is again very interesting, very practical. Okay, so this hadith is about a lady who was employed as a servant in the home of Imam Rida alayhi salam. So you know the history of Imam Rida, that he used to live, which city did he used to live in most of his life? City of Medina, ahsantum. Most of our Ahlul Bayt and Muslim, their city was Medina. But towards the end of his life, he was forced to move to Marv, to Khorasan province. Okay? And when he was forced to move, he was forcefully appointed as the successor to Ma'mun al-Rashid. So he was the crown prince, right? So the crown prince has to have servants. So there was a lady who was appointed as a servant for the home of Imam Rida alayhi salam. So she describes her experience in the home of the Imam, which is very valuable. Imagine that, I would find it incredible, the opportunity to spend even one day in the home of an Imam and see how he does things at home. So she's reporting from inside, what did she see? So she says that when I went to the home of Imam Rida alayhi salam, first of all, she says, I found it to be a simple home. It wasn't like fancifully decorated. And for me, she says, I found it a bit not so easy because I was used to a lot of luxury and a lot of opulence. But for her, so that's the way she was. That's one point that was interesting. Second thing, she says that the Imam appointed a lady to train me. And one thing that she would do is she would wake me up for the night prayer and she would teach me how to do that. So it's very interesting that in the home of Imam Rida alayhi salam, he wanted even his servants to be engaged in ibadah in the nighttime. So that's second point. And the third thing that she mentions is that no one had permission to yell or speak loudly in the home of Imam Rida alayhi salam. Meaning that if you went to that home, you would find a home where everyone would be speaking in measured tone. Okay, now, mashallah, sometimes our homes can be filled with a lot of loud voices, right? Where sometimes we wonder, what are the neighbors thinking about us, right? And of course, there's no problem in, having a home which is lively, which is filled with spirit and filled with like love and, of course we have to speak and talk to each other. But when she's saying that no one had permission to raise their voices, what do you think she meant? Obviously she means that people who are raising their voices in anger, right? When they're shouting at each other, when they're yelling at each other. That's not the type of home that our imams used to have, one where there was a lot of fireworks because people can't control their tempers, right? They were people who were measured, people who had that type of sense that we are in the presence of Allah. What right do we have to raise our voices at a fellow believer, right? Even if we're upset, 100% of the time there's a more effective way than raising your voice. Do you agree? 100% of the time there's more. One of the most least effective ways of getting a point across is to raise your voice and to yell. And this is what we see in the seerah of Ahlul Bayt and Islam. So that's the second hadith. Please recite salawat ala Muhammad. So now we're 2/3 done with the hadiths, right? Okay, so it's pretty good. We're making good progress, alhamdulillah. The third hadith is a hadith which I find very, very interesting and beautiful. I've looked at this now for quite some time and I find so many practical lessons in it. Again, I mentioned that I have a chance to spend time in schools, Islamic schools. So one of the things that we try to do, you might wonder, what's the point of having Islamic school, right? We can have, for example, we can have our normal schools and then we can have Sunday school, right? So we learn our math and science and English and social studies and PE and whatnot in our secular school. And then we have our Quran and Tajweed and Ahkam and Akhlaq and Aqaid, etc. in the Islamic school. In the weekend school. So what's the point of an Islamic school? Right? So I'll tell you, one of the things that happens in a good Islamic school is that you have opportunities to have one-on-one conversations with students. And you try to get to know them. And you try to help them because our young people are facing a lot of challenges. There is a crisis of identity among the young people of our community, okay? And I can tell you, I was born and raised in this country. I can tell you that if I look back to the families that I grew up with, right, decades ago, the families I grew up with, in many cases, maybe we have one or two children who are mutadayyin, they've been able to protect and preserve their deen, but there's also one or two children who have lost the way. So it's very scary, right? And so what we try to do is establish connections and talk and understand, what's really going on, and we try to help navigate that, because a lot of times our young people, all they need is some extra love and care and attention. So in this hadith of Imam Rida alayhi salam, we have two people who come to him and they're asking for advice. And it's very beautiful to see the way that the Imam alayhi salam is able to inspire them to strive for something better, to go up one notch on the ladder, and to improve and become better people. So the hadith goes like the following, that there are two people, Ahmad and Hussein, they're students of Imam Rida alayhi salam. So they go to him and they say, one of them says, جُعِلْتُ فِدَاكَ إِنَّا كُنَّا فِي سَعَةٍ مِنَ الرِّزْقِ وَغَضَارَةٍ مِنَ الْعَيْشِ فَتَغَيَّرَتِ الْحَالُ بَعْدَ التَّغْيِيرِ فَادْعُ اللَّهَ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ أَنْ يَرُدَّ ذَلِكَ إِلَيْنَا. So basically their situation was that they were doing well financially, they were living a good life, right? Money was coming in, maybe they were eating well, they had their parties, they had this thing, everything was fine, right? But then things changed. Maybe, I don't know, the economy tanked, right? They raised interest rates. I don't know what happened. Okay, so their situation changed. So they're going to Imam Rida alayhi salam and they're saying, oh Imam Rida, make dua for us so that we can go back to the way things were before. Okay? Now, if we have problems that come up in our lives, one of the most beautiful things we can do is to go to a member of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam and to present our problems to them. It's a very beautiful thing, because we know that Allah has appointed certain people to be the channels for His blessings to flow down on the earth. And these people are the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. So it's a very beautiful act to go and do that. And sometimes we wonder, well, what do we do when we don't have access to the Imam? Like these people had this problem come up, and so they went to visit Imam Rida alayhi salam. We don't have that opportunity to be able to go to the Imam. What do we do? Right? One of the things we know that Ahlul Bayt wanted us to do, my dear brothers and sisters, is they wanted us to meet one another and to gather together. These gatherings that you have, they're very, very precious. Whether it be in the center, whether it be in your homes, when you get together with your families, when you have your children gather together, it's so important. Because this is a way that somehow, by knowing that we're part of a larger network, it helps us to feel regulated and it helps to solve our problems. Sometimes we might be feeling down and we come to the center and we meet one another, and then we come back and we feel like Allah has lifted away one of our problems. And I have to make a point here, and I'm sorry, I know that maybe some of you aren't used to somebody giving so many practical things. Sometimes we just want to say more of like the, manaqib and the stories and these type of things, but I have to be practical. I want to make a practical point here. If you look at the way communities usually evolve, right? They start out by first meeting in each other's homes, and then they rent a place, and then finally they're able to buy or establish a more permanent location. And then they start to think that, okay, well, we need to have our children be educated because otherwise we're going to lose them. So they start a Sunday school, and then eventually at some point then they think about maybe we need a full-time Islamic school as well, right? One thing I want to make a point here, because I was surprised to realize that there's no weekend school here, right? Brothers and sisters, you see how your young children right now, how they like to come to the center. What do they like here? Do they like the lecture? They're coming here, they're like, oh, I want to hear that speaker, and they couldn't care less about what the speaker is saying, I'm guessing, right? Mashallah, I see some of them trying to listen, Allah reward them. But what do they like about being in the center? What is it? They like to be together, right? Because they know that there's somebody who they share an identity with. And that identity is so valuable. Why? Because when they're placed in those other settings, right, like public school, right, what happens is that a lot of times they feel like they gotta hide who they are. But finally, in this place, they have a place where they can feel like they can be who they are and not be ashamed of it. And to know that there's other people who are like me is so valuable, right? So when you're thinking about this, right, Alhamdulillah, we have hadith which says that that when somebody has the harara of the qatl of Imam Husayniya, when somebody has that burning fire in their hearts because of what happened to Imam Husayniya, that's never going to leave their hearts. Right? We have that hadith, you heard that hadith before. But what about our children who may not already have that love and that burning in their hearts? Right? For all of you people who are listening to me right now, right? MashaAllah, you've been doing this for years, right? You have that love in your heart. But it's those young people that we have to be concerned about. How are they going to develop that love and that burning in their heart? So when you're thinking, even if it's an opportunity, I don't care if you even have just one class or you have half an hour class, but for young people to meet and have fun and to enjoy each other's company, it's such a valuable thing if you want to invest in your future. And of course, if you can add a class there or two, then that's something which is beneficial as well. Right? This is not an option, this is a necessity. Right? It must take place. Right? And it can't, don't think that by going virtual and having them log on to like a Zoom session where they teach them aqaid and ahkam and the Quran, that's going to take the place of having that in-person meetup. Right? We want our children, because what happens is that when they get to a certain age and they're like, well, I don't want to just come to the center and run around because I'm too old for that. So what's going to attract them? What's going to attract them is knowing that they have friends who they know and who they can talk to, right? So it's so important in terms of developing those social networks. And of course, then the forward thinkers of your community need to start be planning for how do we tackle the issue of education for our children. Because otherwise what happens sometimes is that we're raising our children, we're telling them to be like this and like that, but then we're putting them in environments where it's very difficult. One of the brothers told me that it's like you put white clothes on somebody and then you tell them to go run around in a muddy playground. Right? Is that easy? Obviously not. And you tell them not to get anything on their white clothes. It's very hard. Right? It's very difficult. Right? So those are things that we need to start thinking about, inshallah. Now, these two people come to Imam Rida alayhi salam and they're looking for advice. They say that our situation is changed. Can you make dua for us? Now, Imam Rida could have finished it off. He could have told them that, I got you. I'm going to make dua. Inshallah, everything's going to come back to you and things will be fine. Don't worry. Wassalam. But that's not what he says. He asks them a question. And he says, Ayyu shay'in turidun. What is it that you actually are after? Okay? And brothers and sisters, even if my whole lecture was this one line, right? I think it would be enough. Ayyu shay'in turidun. What is it that you really are after in your life? This is what the Imams want us to ask ourselves. That what is your goal? Right? Is your goal just like 99.99% of the people, which is that you want to eat good, you want to live in a good house, you want to enjoy, right? Then think, right? What happens after that? Right? Eventually you get to a point where money can't buy your happiness. Food is food. This is that, whatever. You've seen it, done it, and then what? Right? What are we actually here for? So the Imam ﷺ asked them, Ayyu shay'in turidun? Takununa muluka? Do you want to be kings? Right? Is that what you're after? You want to live the life? Right? And then he asked them, Ayasurruka an takuna mithla tahir wa harthama? And this is a really interesting question. I don't want to get into too much detail here, but Tahir and Harthama were people who, they were very famous people. Like, for example, one of them was famous, he was known as Dhul Yaminain. Dhul Yaminain meaning the person who has two right arms. Right? What does that mean if you have two right arms? So usually you have one arm that's stronger than the other arm. Right? But imagine that you are ambidextrous and both your arms are very powerful. So this man, in war, he could take his sword with the right hand and then you take his sword in the left hand and do the same thing. Right? So he was very fearsome. So Imam Rida asked them, like, who's your role models? Is it these type of people? وَأَنَّكَ عَلَى خِلَافِ مَا أَنْتَ عَلَيْهِ. Okay, now this is like really a key line. That, do you value what you actually are? Do you realize that you are a follower of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam? And that's part of your identity. Do you want to achieve like this worldly status, but then lose out on this thing that you do have, which is very precious, which is your knowing and accepting the Ahlul Bayt as your leaders and your role models and your guides? And when the Imam asked them this question, then this person who is the spokesperson, he says, قلت لا والله ما يسرني أن لي الدنيا بما فيها من ذهبا وفضة وأني على خلاف ما أنا عليه. Right? He thinks about it, and he says that even if you give me this entire world filled with gold and silver, I would not want that, but if I have to give up what I actually am all about, which is that I am a Shia, I am one who adheres to your wilayah, meaning that I follow you, I accept you as my leader, and you are my role model. Brothers and sisters, having a firm identity is so important. We want to be able to tell our children what? Okay, this is going to come up for you if it hasn't already come up. Your children will ask you at different stages, well, why don't we do this and why don't we do that? Right? Why do I have to stay away from this? Why am I always told I can't do this and I can't do that? Right? And then there'll be, if we don't approach it correctly, right, there'll be a lot of like compromising that we have to do. Like, well, okay, well, let me give in on this, but then not on this, and give in on this and on this, right? You can take that approach, or you can take another approach, which is that we are followers of Ahlul Bayt. This is what we do, and this is what we don't do. Why? Because we're followers of Ahlul Bayt. Right? It makes it so much easier when we identify ourselves. This is how we carry ourselves. We're very proud of this identity that we have our role models and we follow them. Right? And this is what we want to instill for our children and know and value it. And this is why, the importance of having these type of gatherings, allowing them to connect and feel that identity. So then Imam Rida continues and he says, فقال فمن أيسر منكم فليشكر الله إن الله عز وجل يقول لئن شكرتم لأزيدنكم وقال سبحانه وتعالى اعملوا آل داود شكرا وقليل من عبادي الشكور وأحسن الظن بالله من حسن ظن بالله كان الله عند ظنه. Okay, now, Imam Rida alayhi salam now starts to give them advice. Why? Because he realizes that they are feeling down, right? They're coming to the Imam and they're worried, right? And they're troubled. And so Imam alayhi salam is giving them 3 things to think about, 3 practical points of advice. And one of the things that in modern day psychology that they say, which is interesting, they say that if you have a negative emotion, okay, and you want to combat that negative emotion, then try to feel 3 positive emotions, and you'll see that those 3 positive emotions will come and wipe out that negative emotion. That's just based on human behavior, right? And it's very interesting that Imam Rida alayhi salam gives them 3 positive things to think about in order to combat the negativity that they're facing. What are those 3 things? He tells them, number 1, he reminds them about gratitude, and the second thing he reminds them about is he gives them hope and optimism, and the third thing he reminds them about is the importance of satisfaction. So gratefulness, optimism, and satisfaction. Okay? Now, brothers and sisters, right, sometimes we need these reminders for ourselves. Right? I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to answer the question for yourselves. Okay? When is the last time let me make it simple. In the last 24 hours, how many times have you actively felt gratefulness to Allah in the last 24 hours? Right? And maybe some of you are saying that I've done it maybe 100 times, right? Where I actively felt grateful to Allah. Okay, but if I ask someone like myself, right, maybe I would be like, if I think back the last 24 hours, there's a lot of times when I was negative about my situation. I felt like a little bit kind of disturbed or a little bit upset, right? And I wanted to complain. But in terms of feeling grateful about my situation, I don't know if I really had that experience. Okay? The Ahlul Bayt, they wanted us to look at our situation and try to look at it with the right glasses and to frame it in the right way. And one of the ways that they always wanted us to look at a situation is how can we see the khair in it? How can we see the goodness? How can we see things that help us be grateful about them? Okay, and again, in modern psychology, there's a whole, what they call a science of gratitude that they've so quote unquote discovered, right? Where they talk about how just being grateful, it changes your brain in a positive way. Just being grateful. And they don't say that you have to be grateful to God or grateful, you just have to be grateful. Just feel gratefulness. And even that makes you change your brain. And it's like, wait a minute, right? You guys are talking about this, and we have such incredible, powerful teachings about gratefulness and gratitude from the Quran, from Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, right? And we can see how Imam Rida alayhi salam is combating their negative thinking by using the force of gratitude and gratefulness. Okay? That's one. Number two is optimism. The Imam Rida alayhi salam is telling him that وَأَحْسِنَ الظَّنَّ بِاللَّهِ, right? And I don't have time, we're not going to go into this in too much detail, but I just want to say this point, that for a believer, right, when it looks like everything is falling down and there's no hope, right? And unfortunately we have, especially young people these days, who sometimes are despairing and they feel like they're losers, they're unworthy. Just a few days ago I was speaking with a young man who told me himself, I asked him, I said that why are you smoking? Right? Why are you so keen on smoking? I was really saddened to find out that he was smoking. And you know what his answer was? He says that the reason why I smoke is because what? No, almost. That's not his, for him, he said that because I don't want to feel the pain. So I asked him, well, why do you feel the pain? Right? You know what he said? Very interesting. He said, I feel the pain because I don't feel valued for who I am. So I asked him, so what is your relationship like with your mom and your dad? He said, not good. Right? So there it goes. Right? But what's good is that it was like it didn't take hard to diagnose him. Now we know what the problem is. Now all we got to do is what? We have to value him, and inshallah he's going to change, right? So immediately I started to kind of joke with him and tell him this. I was like, what do you mean? You have all these things going for you, right? You're smart, you're this, you're that, whatever like that. And inshallah, not just myself, but there'll be a whole team of people now who are going to go and try to connect with him and, inshallah, uplift his self-esteem. What I want to say though, brothers and sisters, is that there's something that we have access to which is so powerful when we feel despair and we feel hopeless. And what that teaching is this knowledge that everything is within the scope of being observed by Allah. Right? Allah is not absent from our situations. Allah is there. And we're told that we should have husnul dhann billah. Meaning what? Meaning that we should hold the best opinion of Allah, even when things seem to be going wrong. I didn't get the thing I wanted. I didn't get the job I wanted. I didn't get the grades I wanted. I didn't get into the college I wanted to get into. This thing didn't happen, this didn't happen. We should always assume the best of Allah, meaning that we say that it's okay, right? Allah's in charge, there must be some khair in this. And we're told that if we have that opinion of Allah, then can Allah in the dhann, meaning that whatever our opinion of Allah is, that's exactly what it's going to be like. Allah will always be doing things in our best interest. And it's such a powerful tool when we're trying to feel better about the situation. Sometimes we think that no, there's no hope out, but we have to have husnul dhann billah. We have to assume that Allah's in charge and He's going to deal with things in the best way possible. And finally, the last thing Imam Rida alayhi salam tells them is man radiya bil qalili min ar-rizq qabila Allahu minhu al-yasira min al-amal. Meaning that if you are content with where you're at right now, then Allah is going to accept those little deeds that you perform. Meaning that what should our happiness be tied to? Should it be tied to this type of dream that we have that we're never going to fulfill? Sometimes people are never happy and they're always trying to grow and grow and grow and grow and grow, they get an apartment, that's not enough. They get a house, it's not enough. They want to go into, a bigger house and a bigger house. And only finally at the end of their life, when they get what they want materially, they realize that there's no happiness in that either. Right? So what Imam Rada tells is that just be content with what you have. You can strive for having more, no problem. But be content with where you're at right now. And if you're content, then you should know that Allah is going to accept your actions. And what more happiness can we get than to know that Allah is accepting our deeds and it's counting for us. And we're building our hereafter. So these are some of the practical teachings of Imam Rada alayhi salam. I don't want to go too much into this, but I hope that we benefited from these 3 hadith. Just to recap, the first one had to do with Imam Rada alayhi salam and the way he would spend time talking to his family. The second one had to do with the way people would talk inside of his home. And the third one had to do with the way that he would counsel the people who came to him. Now, I want to move now to talk about the musibah for tonight, and inshallah I will end. Tonight we're commemorating the wafat of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Please recite salawat. And because I won't be with you in a couple of nights from now, I wanted to mention a little bit about the musibah of Imam Rida alayhi salam. We mentioned that Imam Rida alayhi salam is al-Imam al-Ra'uf. But Imam Rida alayhi salam is not the only one who is known as al-Ra'uf. If we go to the Quran, we see that Allah Ta'ala describes Rasulullah as what does he say about Rasulullah? He says that أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. He says that عزيز عليه ما عنتم حريص عليكم بالمؤمنين رؤوف رحيم. Right? Rasulullah was from amongst the people, and it was very hard for him what the troubles that they would go through. He wanted very much for people to be guided and to be on the right path. And he was very compassionate and very merciful. Rasulullah was very kind. One of the stories that's told about towards the end of Rasulullah's life, I'm sure you've heard it before, but it's good for us to be reminded about it. They say that when Rasulullah was in the masjid, he made an announcement, public announcement. He said that if anybody has a haqq on me, anybody has any right on me that I haven't fulfilled, let him speak right now, and I would like to fulfill that right. Now, of course, everyone was like, Rasulullah, us to have a right on you. If anything, you have a right on us. Right? You gave your whole life to guide us. You gave so much sacrifice, and you were harisun alayna. You wanted us to be guided in this way. We don't have any haqq on you. But there was one man who stood up and he said, I have a claim. So Rasulullah told him, come forward and tell me, what is the claim that you have? So the man says that there was one battle that we were riding towards, and when you were on your horse and I was on my horse, it just so happened that the stick that you had, it grazed my stomach, and I want to now do like kind of a qisas type of thing. Whatever happened to me, I want that same thing to happen to you. So Rasulullah said that, in fact, I want you to bring that same stick and then do the same thing to me that happened to you. So they go and they get the stick from the home of Rasulullah. One of the reports says that Sayyidah Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam, when she found out what's happened, she was worried that my father is going to be hit with a stick. But they take, and Rasulullah gladly, he lifts up his shirt and he says that, oh man, you can go and take your revenge. Go ahead and strike me the same way that you were struck. So the man goes to Rasulullah and he bends down, and instead of striking him, he kisses Rasulullah in that place. And he says that, Ya Rasulullah, all of this I did just because I wanted that honor to be able to kiss you. You see how love of Rasulullah can help somebody. There's this story that's told of the pillar of Hannana. You know, Hannana is a pillar right now. Even when you go to Medina, there's a place which they marked off as the place of Hannana. They say that Rasulullah, when he used to give the khutbahs, he would lean against the trunk of a palm. And for many years he would do that. But then the ashab, they saw that maybe Rasulullah, it would be better for him to sit, so they carved and built a minbar. They said that Rasulullah, when you give your khutbahs, then you sit on the minbar. So when he went to the minbar and he was about to give his speech, they heard the wailing, a wailing noise. And they said that, where is this wailing coming from? And they realized that it was coming from that same pillar. You know, it was haneen meaning like a cry with a lot of emotion and grief. So Rasulullah went to that pillar and he put his hands and he calmed it and he assured it. And then he went back to give the khutbah, and they asked him afterwards, Ya Rasulullah, what, tell us the story of this wailing. And he explained to them that this pillar had become used to my leaning on it. And when I left it to go sit on the minbar, it was saddened by my departure. And so it began wailing, and it became known in history as the pillar of Hanana, meaning the wailing pillar. One of the Islamic poets, he has this line of poetry which is very beautiful, where he says that the light of Mustafa made the pillar of Hanana to make that sound and that wailing. And then he says in the Persian language, he says, Kamtar as chubi nisti, Hananishu, meaning that you're a human being. You're not less than a piece of wood, right? You're a human being. You should at least be like this Hanana, meaning that inside of you, you should have a wailing as well. When you feel that you are far from Ahlul Bayt, right? You should be crying within it. You should be asking Allah, I need Ahlul Bayt to be part of my life. فَمَعَكُمْ مَعَكُمْ لَا مَعَ عَدُوِكُمْ, as we say. We want to always be with Ahlul Bayt. We want to feel their presence. We want to be connected with them. And if we don't feel like that, we should be wailing and asking Allah, how can I survive without having the presence and that assurance that my guides are with me, my imams are with me. Sallallahu alayka ya Rasulullah, Sallallahu alayka ya Habib Allah, Sallallahu alaykum ya Ahl Bayt al-Nubuwah wa mawdi' al-Risala ومختلف الملائكة ومعدن العلم وأهل بيت الوحي. Let us take a moment to remember the martyrdom of Ali ibn Musa al-Rida, al-Imam al-Ra'uf. May Allah Ta'ala give us that opportunity in the near future to be at the Haram of Imam Rida, to be in that beautiful location, seeing the beautiful golden dome of the Imam and giving him our salam in person. Sallallahu alayka ya Ali ibn Musa al-Rida al-Murtada. Abu Salih, the companion of Imam Rida alayhi salam, says that I saw my master Imam Rida coming back from the palace of Ma'mun. He would sometimes stand and then he would sit for some time. He would stand and then he would sit. I realized that his condition was very severe. Sometimes when somebody is given poison, it takes some time to spread through the body. But in the case of Imam Rida alayhi salam, I don't know what kind of poison Ma'mun al-Rashid la'natullahi alayhi had given him. But it seemed that the poison had such a strong effect on the Imam that his body was severely affected. Abu Salt said that I saw him uncomfortable. He was moving around like a snake who's troubled. The poison had seeped through his body. Imam Rida alayhi salam had so much difficulty with Ma'mun. Ma'mun had forced him to take this position. But Imam Rida alayhi salam knew that in order to preserve the Shia Islam, the Wilayah of Ahlul Bayt, he had to accept this position. But Ma'mun al-Rashid, who had invited him, had now poisoned him. Abu Salt says that suddenly I saw a young man who came. He was Imam Jawad alayhi salam. I asked him, how did you come? Where did you come from? He says, I came from the door. Imam Jawad alayhi salam is there to be with his father and to bury the body of his father at the end of his life. But let us remember another time when the grandfather of Imam Rida alayhi salam is about to leave this world. Imam Hussein alayhi salam is lying there on the sands of Karbala. He had cried out, هل من مغيث يغيثنا هل من ناصر ينصرنا هل من ذاب يذب عن حرم رسول الله. Is there anyone who can come and defend the haram of Rasulullah? But there is no one to answer them. Imam Sajjad alayhi salam says that I tried to get up and I took my sword, but my strength was so little that my sword was dragging on the ground. And when my father saw me, he told Kulthum, restrain him, do not let him go, so that the earth is not empty of a hujjah of Allah. When Imam Hussein alayhi salam is now there and Shimr is perched on his chest, who is there to support him? Who is there to be with him? Zainab alayhi salam is there, and she is asking the enemy army, Ana fikum Muslim? Is there no Muslim amongst you? And when no one answers, she turns to Umar ibn Sa'd and she asks him, Ayuqtalu Abu Abdullah wa anta tanzuru ilayh? Will my brother be killed and you are just looking at him? And Umar ibn Sa'd, his eyes begin to tear, but he turns his eyes away from Zainab. He cannot look at her, he cannot answer her. When Imam Hussein alayhi salam is martyred, does he have any family there with him? No. Rather, the body is lying there, and one after the other, the enemy soldiers come to the body of Imam Hussein and they loot the body. They even take the ring from the finger of the Imam alayhi salam. But they don't stop there. Afterwards, they take their horses and they go and they trample the body of the martyrs. Ala la'natullahi ala al-qawm al-zalimin. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. We ask Allah Ta'ala to accept as much as from us. We ask Him to accept especially the efforts of those who sponsored tonight's program. We ask Him to keep the love of the Ahlul Bayt always burning strongly in our hearts. We ask Him to protect our next generations and to keep them on the path of Ahlul Bayt. We ask Him to hasten the reappearance of the Imam of our time, and we ask Him to help all those who are oppressed in this world, especially the oppressed in occupied Palestine.